World War III is heating up, and the United States is on autopilot.
So as we can see, as a result of this escalating proxy war in Syria, the relations between the U.S. and Russia are completely disintegrating right before our eyes. The relations between the U.S. and Russia are completely disintegrating right before our eyes.
He said, "I would like to caution Washington's colleagues to conduct a thorough calculation of the possible consequences of such plans."
But here we have in Russia, they're encouraging their citizens to prepare for a massive nuclear war.
We're on the precipice of a military conflict with a world superpower. You know, this administration has done everything they can to unravel the diplomacy that's taken place between our two countries over the past 40 years. What does that say to you? We are in deep doo-doo here. We are in deep doo-doo here.
As president, I will make it clear that the United States will treat cyber attacks just like any other attack. We will be ready with serious political, economic, and military responses.
Sometimes I'm criticized in my own country for professing a belief in international norms and multilateral institutions, but I am convinced that in the long run, giving up some freedom of action, binding ourselves to international rules, over the long term enhances our security.
Russia is preparing. They're preparing their people. 40 million people taking place in a nuclear drill, yet we're not doing the same. There's something really wrong with that.
But I tell you, we've got the head of the army, we've got the chairman joint chiefs saying prepare for war with Russia, as big as World War II, nuclear war. What was going on? I've studied history. I've been on air 20 years. I've never heard generals talk like this. What is going on, Paul?
Well, they're trying to re-energize this regime change operation in Syria. I guarantee if Hillary gets in within 6 months, she'll be going into Syria. And it's already proven so great, hasn't it? An international migrant crisis, thousands of people dead, ruined countries strewn across the Middle East. She's going to make that even worse. Now she's talking about going to war with Russia if there's so much of a hint that they hacked some emails. She actually came out and said that.
But if there's a nuclear war and a woman leads it, then it's cool though, right?
Yeah, so they're doing drills where 40 million people in Russia are practicing evacuation drills. They've just built underground shelters for 12 million people. This is hyping up. You've got their top Ministry of Defense TV channel warning people that nuclear war is on the horizon. This is very real. You've got the US Army chief coming out and saying, we're going to destroy our enemies. Then he goes on to talk about Russia. It's obviously aimed at Russia. This is what's going to happen. You've got that attack on the aid convoy a few weeks ago. That's come out. The independent investigators went in and looked. It was a complete hoax. Russia didn't bomb an aid convoy from the sky. The road's perfectly pristine. These aid trucks look like they've been burnt out. There's no evidence of an airstrike. That looks like it was a complete hoax. You've got every single media news channel hyping this war.
Just wanted to bring to your attention here on October the 7th, this was released this morning that Russia is pondering the relaunch of its military bases in Cuba and Vietnam. This is clearly a prophetic broadcast news that I see on the horizon. It is Moscow is considering plans to return to Cuba and Vietnam, where it had military bases in the past, Russian Deputy Defense Minister Nikolai Pankov said on Friday. Now, those of you that may not be aware of this, Russia, of course, closed the base down in the mid-1980s. This was at a height of the tensions we know, especially back in the 60s under John F. Kennedy, when we had the standoff between the United States and Russia on certain defenses that they were bringing in nuclear missiles and it nearly sent the world to a nuclear war. Now we are seeing that Russia is planning on reopening the Cuban air base, and of course that would give striking distance for a Russian MiG to be able to strike anywhere in Florida, in that part of the hemisphere of the United States, taking the southern section of the United States easily. But we have to also consider this fact as well. It seems that Russia is only starting to play the same game that the United States has been playing now for over the last 2 years against Russia, ever since the Ukrainian crisis began, that was started by the CIA to topple President Yanukovych and install the U.S.-backed Roman puppet there for Petro Poroshenko over the Ukrainian people. And then, of course, they began a genocide on those that were Russian-speaking people inside the country. Ever since then, though, NATO has used this particular basis to launch more and more military setups inside of right there on Russia's border in Lithuania, Latvia, now Poland, etc. NATO is building up massive amounts of troops there. Up to 30,000 are stationed there on a rotation basis, on a regular basis. Everything against all the agreements that the U.S. made with Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, promising that they would never do these things. What's odd is how that the U.S. government caused the fall in the topple of the democratically elected leader Yanukovych from power, and then turn around and blame Russia for invading Ukraine. Well, Russia never invaded Ukraine. If anything, it would be similar to that of Syria. Yanukovych invited Russia there to rescue him from the coup that was being staged by the CIA. There's been enough leaked documents that can prove that already. So it's just tit for tat, it seems like. Now Russia's starting to give the Obama administration a taste of its own medicine. Things have changed under the Obama administration, and now even in the political scheme of things, we're seeing that even Donald Trump is starting to back away a little bit from standing and bringing peace about between the United States and Russia, and starting to lean more towards the Obama administration's rhetoric, stating that Russia broke the ceasefire in Syria, when indeed Russia never broke the ceasefire. It was clearly broke by the United States when they did the attack on the Syrian army, as well as their little back thugs all through the nation of Syria. And of course, the U.S. was the one who started the civil war inside Syria as well. So it's clearly an aggression on the Obama administration. And I can't say that another administration would have done differently, but I do believe that in the case of Donald Trump and Mike Pence, we probably would see a different scenario at this point here.
Well, in response to what it's calling leaks in the Western media, leaks, of course, by the CIA and the Pentagon, that Washington is considering airstrikes in Syria against the Syrian government forces. Well, now the Russian Defense Ministry is actually saying, hey guys, a little gentle reminder, we've got S-300 and S-400 air defenses in place. They're up and running, ready to go. And you might be surprised by the reach and the radius of these weapons. So they are effectively letting the U.S. government know that they're basically setting up their own no-fly zone in Syria, saying, listen, if you put any strikes, target any strikes there in Syria against the government, you are going to be directly putting our forces in danger. The defense official says that members of the Russian Reconciliation Center is on the ground there in Syria. They're delivering aid. They're communicating with a large number of communities there in Syria. And so they're not really going to have enough time to determine a straight line, the exact flight paths of missiles, and then who the warheads belong to. They're not really going to have time to figure all this out. And so they're going to take it out. If you fire into Syria, they are going to shoot down anything that comes their way, any unidentified flying objects. So this defense official is basically cautioning Washington. He says, conduct a thorough calculation of the possible consequences of such plans. Now we know, back in September, they accidentally took out a target which Damascus claimed was a blatant aggression. And they say that moving these missile defense systems is just a purely defensive move. It's not posing any threat. So this is a threat like we're hearing from the Army Chief of Staff, Mark Milley, earlier this week. Take a listen.
We'll stop you and we will beat you harder than you've ever been beaten before. Make no mistake about that. Other countries, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, went to school on us. They closely watched how we fought in 91 and 03. They studied our doctrine, our tactics, our equipment, our organization, our training, and our leadership. And in turn, they revised their own doctrines, and they are rapidly modernizing the militaries today to avoid our strengths in hopes of defeating us at some point in the future.
So as you can see, they are gearing up for World War III, and they have us all distracted by Miss Piggy comments in the news, things that totally do not matter. And let's not forget that also Russia just pulled out of the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, a 16-year agreement. They're basically saying the deal is off.
So I clearly can see, now that I'm seeing that Russia is looking at reopening the Cuban base there, no doubt they will once again station their Russian MiGs there in Cuba as a deterrent with the United States. And even if there is a war that breaks out in the Middle East, it will give them striking distance to Florida. Good news of that is that it may be a little further out. We may not be seeing the war right yet on the horizon. It might be a little further out now for the timing for Russia to move in defenses there, but that could be done practically overnight with Russia as well. So I just don't know what's going to happen. Clearly, we are looking at prophecy when we see, yes, Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 23, concerning Damascus, Hamath is confounded, and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are faint-hearted. There is sorrow on the sea, and it cannot be quiet. Maybe the fight does not begin actually on Damascus itself, but it is concerning Damascus. This is what's interesting. And there is sorrow on the sea. Now they said they have heard evil tidings. That evil tidings may be that there is an attack planned on Russian ships in the sea there, or vice versa. It may be that Russia is planning to deal with American ships in this region. I don't know which way it's going to go. But nonetheless, they are faint-hearted. There is sorrow on the sea, and it cannot be quiet. It lets us know that this is one of the reasons, or one of the things that will cause the war to spiral out of control. Damascus is waxed feeble and turneth herself to flee, and fear hath seized on her. Anguish and sorrow have taken her as a woman in travail. I'm only awaiting to see just how many ships the United States will end up sending into this region as a result of that.
Last night's vice presidential debate centered heavily around the topic of Russia and, in the event, a potential military theater who would best be able to handle Vladimir Putin. One thing is clear, the U.S.-Russia relationship has been in a freefall. The Obama administration proclaimed bilateral peace talks over Syria are, quote, dead with Moscow, and suspended a 16-year-old treaty meant to reduce the risk of nuclear proliferation. The U.S. State Department threatened Russia over their actions in Syria, and according to the White House spokesperson Josh Earnest, he said everybody's patience with Russia has run out, continuing on saying Russians have been complicit in the Syrian tragedy. Well, this comes as the U.S. announced this week that we're withdrawing personnel dispatched to the Middle East in anticipation of a ceasefire deal reached on September the 9th. Putin is also withdrawing, only he's withdrawing from an accord that committed both countries to eliminating stockpiles of plutonium that's used as the core material in some types of nuclear weapons.
We do have very serious breaking news this evening. Those of you that are aware, we already know that U.S. Army Chief threatens war with Russia. This is reported by Paul Joseph Watson from InfoWars. He reports this. The Army Chief of Staff General Mark Miley warned last night the United States was ready to destroy its enemies in comments that were clearly directed at Russia. Well, the ante has been raised up. This is from the Russian insider. Yana was just here in the office confirming the subtitles here, that we know that everything is accurate in what's being said. I'm going to play portions of it. We can use the subtitles rather than going through every single word by listening to it in Russian, because most of you I know won't speak it. This is a Russian general. Okay, he starts off by saying leaks in the Western media allege that Washington is considering launching airstrikes against Syrian government forces. So now we have that the Russian military is acknowledging that there is a planned attack on the Syrian government. Now, it's not just leaked sources. We also know that the Washington Post has brought this out. We have stated it on Israeli News Live already. We noticed it in the fact that Donald Trump has clearly made the statement now saying that Russia has violated the ceasefire agreement inside of Syria. Now that kind of lets us know that more than likely the presidential nominee, seeing as he is running very high in the polls, has been briefed on a possible strike on Damascus. He goes on to say a particular concern is information that the initiators of such provocations are representatives of the CIA and the Pentagon, who in September reported the U.S. president on the alleged controllability of the opposition fighters, but today are lobbying for a kinetic scenarios in Syria. The Russian general here that is speaking is actually placing this up with the translations in English for you so that you can see. And I believe that Russia is probably behind that because they want the world to know that Russia is taking this serious as well. Let's continue on. He said, I would like to caution Washington's colleagues to conduct a thorough calculation of the possible consequences of such plans. Now, this here is a reverse threat. After we have seen the U.S. General Chief make his threats to Russia, who obviously, as Paul Joseph Watson says, was directed at Russia, now he is letting them know as well of the possible consequences of such plans if the Washington colleagues go forward. He says, today, Syrian army has an effective air defense system, the S-200 and the BUK. Other air defense systems and their technical capabilities have been updated over the past year. All right. He's going to also get into the S-300, S-400. He says, furthermore, I warn American strategists that Russia currently has the S-400 and S-300 air defense system deployed to protect its troops and stationed at the Tartus Naval Base, Supply Base, and the Khmeim Air Base. As the U.S. general did his indirect threat, also the Russian general here is an indirect threat as well. And you're going to see in a moment more of a direct threat. He goes on, and all the illusions of the amateurs about the existence of the AE invisible jets will face a disappointing reality. Again, as I mentioned before, he is speaking about those that are flying without their transponders on. That's why he says the existence of invisible jets will face a disappointing reality. So if there's jets flying without transponders on, where they cannot be identified, Russia's letting the U.S. coalition know they're going to take them down.
So as we can see, as a result of this escalating proxy war in Syria, the relations between the U.S. and Russia are completely disintegrating right before our eyes. I mean, we basically have the Army Chief of Staff saying that our enemies have trained, they've watched us, they see what we're doing, they're ready to strike because they see we have such weak leadership, a weak economy, and they are gearing up for war. Now, give us a little bit of more detail of what we're dealing with, Margaret.
All right, so the Russian reset that was supposedly going to happen in 2009, that Kane alluded to in the vice presidential debate, it failed, and the reason Kane said it failed was because of Vladimir Putin, although Medvedev was actually the president at the time. So, you know, he really discouraged anybody from wanting to know the truth. You don't really know the truth or Russian history if you think that Vladimir Putin isn't the devil. We're here to clear some of that up for you, and it looks like the U.S. has been posturing repeatedly for the past few weeks. We see George Soros come out. It was on CNBC right before coming on set, calling what Russia's doing in Syria utter genocide, one of the greatest humanitarian crises. Well, in reality, we are the ones, we're the provocateurs, we're posturing for war. White House is saying, Moscow, you're dead to us as far as Syrian talks are concerned. You're passing a red line. We see Putin exit a nuclear security pact that's been in place for 16 years that says that they will dispose of the plutonium that they have. So we're really getting closer to a line, Leanne, that we don't, it's in no one's interest to be in this place. And our White House, we know, they're making statements that are really, really dangerous for us. We just heard Milley say that basically he's wanting to engage in this conflict. Tell me whose interest that's in. It's definitely not in ours. And
what Russia has done, they've warned the U.S. that they're actually, poking fun at Josh Earnest a bit here, and they're warning the U.S. that American aircraft could be targeted by its air defense systems over Aleppo if we don't stand down, because they're working with the sovereign state Assad. Meanwhile, Assad is offering amnesty to rebels that surrender in Aleppo. So we have a lot of conflicting narratives going on. Ours is they're the devil, and meanwhile they're preparing for it looks like for war with this drill, and now with the shield, and saying we're going to shoot you down.
This is Russia's version of a no-fly zone. All right, so he goes on to say, and now finally the most important thing. Members of the Russian Reconciliation Center in Syria are working on the ground, delivering aid and communicating with a large number of communities in Syria.
Самое важное. Сегодня большинство офицеров Российского центра примирения враждующих сторон работают гуманитарными главами.
As a result of their work, 732 populated places and hundreds of thousands of Syrians went back to a peaceful life. As he goes on about this, he says, therefore, any missile or airstrike on the territory controlled by the Syrian government will create a clear threat to Russian servicemen. And do we realize how serious this is, friends? Any area. Because now he is saying 732 populated places. That's a lot of area in Syria. 100,000 Syrians went back to a peaceful life, and that they have humanitarian aid workers, Russian workers working in all these areas, so that any attacks in any of these areas, there he says, therefore, any missile or airstrikes on the territory controlled by the Syrian government will create a clear threat to Russian servicemen. Now we know where Russia's position is. If you strike any of the Syrian armed forces, as the U.S. is now considering once again on the table, Russia will take it as a direct attack on them, because their men are working in amongst them. All right? Now, I am warning anyone that after U.S.-led coalition jets bombed positions of the Syrian government forces on September 17th in Deir el-Zor,
Нанесение 17 сентября самолетами коалиции удара по сирийским войскам в Дейр-эз-Зоре, мы приняли все необходимые меры.
we will take all necessary measures to prevent other American mistakes against Russian military or other military facilities in the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic. That's how serious the threat is.
And isn't it just incredible that on the mainstream media, for instance, I'm seeing that the main trending topic is the fact that Sean Hannity and Megyn Kelly are fighting with each other. It's like, who cares about these celebrity news pundits? Nobody cares. They are gearing up for World War III, and then whoever gets elected, gets in office, is going to have to be dealing with this, which is why Hillary Clinton hopes to God that it's her, because she's been kind of behind the scenes working on this with the Obama administration for years.
The woman has been chomping at the bit. She even, when she mentioned Alex Jones, she also mentioned Putin and indicated that she was going to meet Putin's alleged involvement in a cyber attack with military action. Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. So she's been posturing for this for quite some time. We know that the Obama administration, their narrative regarding the Syrian refugee crisis has failed. And everything that they've tried to do, even entering Syria, the U.S. population has pushed back against. So they haven't had the support to do it, or we would have already seen it. And Russia, at the aid of Assad, I'm not here to judge Assad, bad guy, good guy, dictator, not good guy. The facts are what we are doing, what our government is doing. The hostile actions that are being perceived. These are things that are going to have long-term repercussions. And I really pray this doesn't happen. But I could see our warplanes getting into a provocation with Russian warplanes over Aleppo. This is the news of today, which is much more important, as you pointed out, is Megyn Kelly's stupid hair or some stupid spat or Kim Kardashian's butt. I don't really care what's going on, nor do we follow this type of stuff. But I encourage you, take a look at these articles, go online and look at it for yourself, because it's there.
I know we can say all day long. We can say all day long that Russia's doing this or Russia's doing that. Many journalists have tried to bring this out. Journalists, peace activists from the United States, from Britain, have all been trying to bring this out, that we are getting a wave, an enormous wave of propaganda from the U.S. coalition that is there to try to justify toppling Bashar al-Assad. it is a very serious situation. And the one thing that would diffuse the entire thing is if the Obama administration would leave President Bashar al-Assad out of this, leave Russia out of this, and allow them to do as they were doing to begin with, and that was to bring the country back under control. In the secret released audio recording of John Kerry, he stated in there, the one that was recorded in New York, where he was meeting with Syrian opposition leaders there in New York City in the United States, he stated that they knew Daesh or ISIS had taken over half of the country under control already. So they were watching and they were observing. They weren't doing anything to take them out. Although they had claimed to the American public they were there to get rid of ISIS, they never took them out, and neither did the Syrian government ever invite him there to do so. But instead he said they were hoping that this would bring about the opportunity to be able to negotiate with President Bashar al-Assad and a change in power. But he said they weren't expecting the Russians to step in. This countered the entire thing. Russia began to do major advancements in turning it around for the Syrian government. Even there have been Western analysts that have, military analysts that have also agreed that Russia turned the tide for the Syrian government. That's when the U.S.-led coalition came in, and this is what has caused such a major mass loss of life in the Syrian country, is the actions of the Obama administration not willing to lose this part of the world. In a roundabout way, this is what the general is saying here. He's basically talking about a no-fly zone. If something's coming in and it's got its transponders off to identify the type of aircraft it is, they're going to take it down. If they feel threatened, the Syrian government is threatened, they're going to take it down. Things are ready, they're active, and anything could happen at any moment. Remember, U.S. Army Chief threatens war with Russia. Paul Joseph Watson states here. Army Chief of Staff General Mark Miley warned last night the United States was ready to destroy its enemies in comments that were clearly directed at Russia. He said, "I want to be clear to those who wish to do us harm. The United States military, despite all our challenges, despite our operational tempo, despite everything we have been doing, we will stop you and we will beat you harder than you have ever been beaten before. Make no mistake about it," said Miley.
Right, and we've seen that how they have accidentally taken down Russian airliners in the past. Turkey downed Russian Su-24 jet in November of 2015. So they have these type of accidents. And that's what they're basically saying, is that they might have another accident if an unidentified flying object from the U.S. flies over where their servicemen are. And let's also recall that just this week, 40 million Russians were taking place in this nuclear disaster drill. Moscow's basically saying, look, guys, we're building these underground bunkers. We're going to protect our citizenry. When I read this article, it really just made me go, wow. Here we know that the elites are building their underground bunkers. They're being prepared. But then on the other side, people who do get prepared are being made fun of and called, conspiracy theorists and things for, oh, that's just a conspiracy. How dare you? Basically making it illegal to have stockpiles of food and ammunition and things like that. But here we have in Russia, they're encouraging their citizens to prepare for a massive nuclear war.
We're on the precipice of a military conflict with a world superpower. This administration has done everything they can to unravel the diplomacy that's taken place between our two countries over the past 40 years. What does that say to you? We are in deep doo-doo here, and yet very little fanfare. You pointed that out well. Russia is preparing. They're preparing their people. 40 million people taking place in a nuclear drill, yet we're not doing the same. There's something really wrong with that.
Right. It's just like the nuclear preparedness that they used to teach you in school, where they tell you to stick your head in your desk, which is basically just, stick your head between your legs and kiss your butt goodbye, and we'll hold on to your dental records. That's how they're preparing us, because they're quite all right with the fact that the U.S. could be entirely wiped out.
All eyes are on Syria as the globalists, fearing a populist uprising, are pushing the narrative of World War III on humanity.
I want to be clear to those who try to oppose the United States. I want to be clear to those who wish to do us harm. We'll stop you, and we will beat you harder than you've ever been beaten before. Make no mistake about that. Other countries, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea went to school on us in hopes of defeating us at some point in the future.
Mounting tensions with possible nuclear outcomes are worldwide. We are sliding into a new Cold War with Russia as Russia ships new anti-missile systems into Syria. This after Russia held a nuclear war exercise of 40 million Russians, mobilizing 200,000 emergency services and soldiers and 50,000 pieces of equipment. Elsewhere, nuclear tensions have risen between Pakistan and India after a jihadi attack on an Indian Air Force base left 19 soldiers dead. India then entered Pakistan and surgically struck terrorist camps in Kashmir. Breitbart reported, "It is becoming increasingly clear that something serious has changed in relations between Pakistan and India as a result of repeated attacks of violence in the Indian-controlled region of Kashmir. It is clear that each country in a generational crisis era is on a trend line to become increasingly nationalistic and belligerent towards the other, and it is also clear that these trend lines will continue on the same path until they result in war. From the point of view of generational dynamics, it is not a question of if, but of when, and with the rapid rise in nationalism on both sides, when may not be too far off. Of course, with all of the saber rattling, North Korea doesn't want to be left out either. Satellite images reveal North Korea is constructing a submarine capable of getting the North Koreans' newly developed ballistic missiles within range of the United States coastline. CNN reported, "Doing a major test would be a way of trying to intimidate the incoming president. North Korea chooses particular windows that they know will gain maximum attention from the world, and the U.S. in particular. And Iran, after having plane loads of cash and sanctions lifted, is playing its hand." Washington Free Beacon reported the Obama administration misled journalists and lawmakers for more than 9 months about a secret agreement to lift international sanctions on a critical funding node of Iran's ballistic missile program as part of a broader ransom package earlier this year that involved Iran freeing several U.S. hostages, according to U.S. officials and congressional sources apprised of the situation. Breitbart wrote in a speech delivered last month in Tehran and translated this week by the Middle East Media Research Institute, Mohsen Rafidoust, who was minister of the IRGC during the 1980s in the Iran-Iraq War, added that IRGC ground forces are 5 times better than the U.S. Army, saying, "Despite all the enemy media and cultural propaganda against us, if America wants to try its luck against us, it should know that we are completely capable of mobilizing 9 million fighters." And of course, China, with its ambition to become the world's next superpower, is readying its populace for war against the United States. In a Pew Research poll conducted with Chinese citizens, just under half of the respondents said the U.S. is a major threat, according to the report, marking the highest percentage among the 7 potential threats tested on the survey. The other threats included global economic instability, climate change, cyber attacks, and the Islamic State. World War III is heating up, and the United States is on autopilot.
Now, authorities issued an alert for several Mexican states after thieves snatched potentially deadly radioactive material used for industrial radiography. The Iridium-192 source, marked XF71, was inside a container when it was stolen from a truck in Cardenas, a town in southern Tabasco state.
As president, I will make it clear that the United States will treat cyber attacks just like any other attack. We will be ready with serious political, economic, and military responses.
Sometimes I'm criticized in my own country for professing a belief in international norms and multilateral institutions, but I am convinced that in the long run, giving up some freedom of action, binding ourselves to international rules, over the long term enhances our security.
Led by a weak commander-in-chief that has brought military levels down, backed by a State Department embarking on a strategy of foreign policy that has begun a brand new Cold War with Russia, bringing the globe to the brink of World War III.